All right. Thank you so much for joining this visual panel discussion. The title, as you see it in front of you, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, why, how, and the consequences. This is a special topic and is a hot topic. In fact, not just in the United States, is around the world, and especially in Afghanistan. Not necessarily among leaders in Afghanistan, but I know among the masses and then the people, because the people of Afghanistan are the most being impacted by this event, and how it happens and why it happens, and we really don't know the consequences. Before I start the session, I would like to thank some of our people in the office in the Munich Institute for Global Engagement at Bridgewater State University, especially Susan Williams. She is always behind all these great things in terms of the publicity. Thank you, Susan, and our graduate students as well. She does a marvelous job. Okay, thank you for that. And over long years, I learned that if you invest in your good friendship, a relationship with your friends, then I think you will be one of the winners. And that's why I'm fortunate to have many friends in the Middle East. So when I was thinking about this panel, I contacted, for example, Dr. Khalid Shukran. He is the editor-in-chief of RAI, a newspaper, and also Mr. Hadi Shopaki, who is the director of the RAI Studies, or the Public Relation Center for Studies. And they honorably, they put me in touch with Dr. Jawad Alanani, which is really an outstanding contributor. And you will see why I'm saying that. Meanwhile, I wanted to bring some perspective from Iraq, because they were also worried. So thanks to Dr. Tahir al-Baka, who put me in touch with one of our speakers, which I will always introduce him. Dr. Diyari is from Al-Mustansiriya University in Baghdad. Meanwhile, I always rely on our own, my own friends on campus. Always Dr. Brian Frederick, and of course, Rachel is on my mind when it comes to these topics, because they are from the political science, and we've been on this road for a long time. And also thank you for Dr. Chen Wan, because he is really sponsoring this through the Asian Studies program. It's always MENA Studies program at Bridgewater State University and the Asian Studies program, they work hand in hand. That's why the two coordinators or director, they got the distinguished award, or the presidential award, last year. So thank you, Chen, my friend. And all our students that they are attending, or our guests from different countries, we appreciate that. And also I appreciate, who is in attendance now, Dr. Uman Kaito is the associate provost or assistant provost for global engagement. We are always proud of our global engagement for Bridgewater State University, which is a public school with almost 10,000 students. But we are really, it is a very dynamic, is very active community. We always travel, even through the cyber or through online, despite of the fact that we are challenged, all of us, as you know, by the pandemic and coronavirus. But that really didn't, reduce our determination to connect with the whole world. And that's why we are busy doing these things, trying to share the knowledge. We don't pretend that we have all the knowledge, but we share the knowledge, and also we learn from our guests when they speak about different topics. And again, thank you all, for your time. And I would like to first bring His Excellency, Dr. Jawad Al-Anani, to speak, give us his perspective on the withdrawal of the U.S. And of course, Dr. Jawad Al-Anani, he knows about politics as well, about the economy as well. And he, I need probably long time to each of you to introduce you to our audience. However, I'm just going to be very selective. He was the foreign minister and chief of the royal court in Jordan. Also, he was the deputy of the prime minister. He was also the minister of information and the minister of cabinet affairs. So, I mean, he knows, the world inside out and outside in. And I hope his perspective will, after we're done with this event, every one of us has learned something and outcomes that we're going to apply. So Dr. Jawad Al-Anani, is an honor and it's a pleasure to have you, and the floor is yours, sir. And each one will speak up to 15 minutes. So I'm going to be very rude because I'm going to interrupt the flow of the discussion. Go ahead, Dr. Al-Anani.
Thank you very much for having invited me, and I appreciate that, Dr. Jabbar, and I appreciate the company of such an august gathering that you have put together for this event. The topic at hand is actually underestimated in its impact on the region, and the impact of the withdrawal, sudden withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan. We were only talking about a small number, 2,500 soldiers that remained there. Yet the withdrawal of 12,000, for instance, by President Trump did not cause any stir. Yet the 2,500, which were remaining in Pakistan, caused all that stir because of two reasons. First of all, there were criticisms of the fact that the way it happened, and it left first of all, by many critics, left the Taliban very much in power, and without holding the Taliban to the promises or to the reforms which everybody was hopeful would take place in Afghanistan itself. So anyway, there were mixed feelings. While some people wanted inside the United States to see the troops getting out, but at the same time, they were not happy with the results of that sudden withdrawal. Now, of course, as President Biden wanted to justify that after the polls showed that his popularity was actually has decreased very much by that decision and the way it was implemented. Well, he explained in his address to the nation that the event had to be coming. It was in the pipelines for a long time, and it was inevitable, so there was no way to avoid that. However, I am much more concerned why the United States did that. Are there any other reasons besides the one which were publicized in the editorials and news coverages of the withdrawal? Well, first of all, if you look at the agenda of the United States, I was in the United States when His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan was there. I was not in the team, but I was meeting with top US officials. Of course, everybody was telling me that we're not paying so much attention to the Middle East. It's not on our priority list right now. We are very much focused on China and some other issues, and the economic issues inside the United States of America. And the COVID, of course, that has become a nagging issue and a very pressing one. So anyway, but when you tell them, does that mean that the United States is actually leaving the Middle East, as some analysts in Europe were saying? You know, in the British, for instance, Gresham House, I participated in a seminar with them, and I had to go into a severe argument with them. I said there is a huge difference between the United States repositioning itself in the Middle East and leaving the Middle East, because there is no way that I could believe any rational US president or policymaker, would really think of leaving the Middle East. Leaving him to whom? It was President Eisenhower in the 1950s, after the Suez campaign, who said that there was a vacuum left by the departure of the two ex-colonial powers, namely France and the United Kingdom, and it was the turn of the United States to come in and fill that vacuum. Right now, do we see a reversal of that process? I don't think so, with all due respect. There are so many issues which are very important. That strategic position, the geostrategic position of the Middle East, controlling the most important waterways, the most important flow of trade in the world, could not be left to be controlled by China or by any other superpower. Not now. So in a way, while you're saying that because of China, I'm leaving the Middle East, then that is a negation or does not tally with the fact that you need the Middle East to be on your side for any confrontation in the future with China, whether that is on a Cold War level or even a hot war level, or if it is just merely an economic war, whether currency wars in the future, technology wars, and trade wars. So in a way, the Middle East right now is the biggest trade partner. The biggest trade partner of the Middle East, as you know, is China right now. It's not the United States, it's not the EU or anybody else. So in a way, you have to find a way to study the impact of your withdrawal from Afghanistan and why is it being used by everybody so much. It's because everybody is trying to position themselves vis-a-vis the new agenda of the United States, and everybody was trying to see how can they benefit. So in a way, it was a sort of a mercantilist approach. Everybody wants to benefit, cash in on the situation. Yeah. Let me talk about Jordan as a specific case. Why did Jordan benefit from US withdrawal? This is very interesting. First of all, because when the United States wanted to reposition its forces within the region, they looked at different countries. They find that Jordan is a small country, but it is bordering all troubled areas in the region: Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestine, and at the same time, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. So in a way, it is very important location. The tripartite arrangements which the the current American administration has actually encouraged is the tripartite arrangements made by Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. First of all, to build pipelines, to do infrastructure projects, to facilitate trade among the three countries, and also the attempt or what I call the ambivalent position of the United States regarding Jordan's rapprochement with Syria and allowing Syria to return to the Arab League and become part of the Arab community again. Why Iraq and Syria are being treated like that? Because you are hoping to put pressure on Iran and bring Iran to the table to discuss that. So anyway, Jordan was instrumental in all these things. Thirdly, when you look at the prospects of future Middle East peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, Jordan should play a very important role, at least in the occupied West Bank, which was part of Jordan until 1967. And any attempt, Jordan has strategic interest in any peaceful resolution between Israel and the Palestinians. Why? Because Jordan has refugees. There is the Hashemite custodianship of the holy places in Jerusalem. There is the issue of course, borders, security, water, underground, exchange of electricity, and so on. So in a way, Jordan, among those three areas, Palestinian areas, Israel and Jordan is the biggest in terms of area. And that has been attested by the fact that we just approved a solar energy for water deal this is the first of its kind as a cross-border deal, which was approved and encouraged by the United States. And Mr. John Kerry, who was the president's advisor, came there. But most importantly, Jordan's relations with the United States on a military and intelligence is very important. The United States is building now a huge military basis in Jordan, and it is in the Panhandle area. You know, when I say Panhandle of Jordan, that means it's bordering Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Iraq. So it is a very strategic position to be there. And so therefore, Jordan ended up, because it has proved its mettle, you know, during the crisis of since 2011, when the Arab Spring started, Jordan came out unscathed. They managed to host 1.3 million refugees from Syria. They have also about 700,000 refugees from other 3 countries in the region. They have, you know, fought terrorism, and they sent their troops to do that. And so in a way, Jordan has been actually doing everything that would fit in with the current administrations, or even with the American vested interest in the region. As a result, I think when the United States decided to reposition its forces in the area, I think Jordan came out as a winner from this dialogue. And no American official, whether Republican or Democrat, would say that Jordan is not a valuable asset and a valuable strategic partner for the United States. The readout, which came out after the King's last visit in July to Washington, asserted those things, many of the issues I have said, and that had just preceded the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. It was proven after the post-event that it was really implementable. Many of the things agreed on were actually implemented, and so therefore Jordan ended up benefiting from that. That will impact, of course, the Gulf states. You know, the Gulf states, of course, are now trying. UAE came out also as a big winner. Qatar, I think, came out as a winner because of its role in mediating between the U.S. administration and Taliban. And as you know, most of those discussions or negotiations took place in Doha, the capital of Qatar. So Qatar came out as a winner. Saudi Arabia is yet to streamline its act, to be honest with you. Iraq and Syria probably also won from this. Not because of Afghanistan alone. It is difficult to isolate or determine the size of the impact of the Afghanistan withdrawal on those countries. But in a way, you know, the reason why the United States left is because now the United States is redefining its relations with China, basically. And they want to make sure that whatever relations China has with the Middle East can be confronted or neutralized by U.S. presence and influence. And on the contrary, the United States considers that it must have an edge in the Middle East over China. And that is becoming an uphill fight. It's not taken bona fide as it had been in the past. So in a way, we have to look at the future, and we all have vested interest to see now that the outcome of the elections in Iraq has been out, and we know who are the winners and who are not the winners, or who is the majority. So we hope that a new government will soon be created in Iraq. We will soon see that Syria will go and join the Arab Summit in Algiers. And so in a way, the whole area is gradually and inching towards a quiet and peace. And let's hope that the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the redefinition of US policy, the willingness of the United States not to monopolize, the influence in the region. They need to have their European partners and also the regional partners play a role, probably would facilitate things for the United States and in a big way too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I heard, a new language here. There are winners and there are losers. So I'm afraid we will put, the people of Afghanistan in the second category. That's why I would like to bring Ms. Khadija Hussaini, who's a researcher from Afghanistan who has worked on minority rights, women rights, and the political landscape in Afghanistan. She also has the experience of working with the Norwegian Refugee Council, and through various programs addressing the internal displacement, which is now happening in Afghanistan, crisis in Afghanistan, and also she is the cohort, from really 21 to 23 of the Fulbright scholars, through which she is enrolled and also in a dual degree in Brandies University. Khadija, is an honor to have you with us, and I know you will talk about actually the real impact on the people in Afghanistan, and also the degree of violence and the chaos, in your own country. We are sorry for that, but this is a reality, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jabbar, and thank you for the opportunity to be here among this distinguished panel. Talking about my country has not been easy since the fall of Afghanistan. And I arrived a week before Kabul fell to the Taliban, and it has been a very heartbreaking experience to see what is happening from afar back in my home country. I took the opportunity to focus on my people, on people of Afghanistan in this presentation, basically talking about the impact of US withdrawal on Afghan people and how basically we see it happened and how it continues. I am going to share a screen with you all. I hope everyone can see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can go to the full full slides. Yes. Excellent.
So yes, I'm going to talk about Taliban violence, and basically I want to start with this, the background photo that I have put here. This is where I worked after returning to Afghanistan in 2018. I did my undergrad degree abroad, and I returned to Afghanistan and basically decided to work in as a humanitarian. This is Afghanistan, early 2019, and this the camps that you see here is in Badghis province, where thousands of people were displaced because of both conflict as well as the drought issue that we had back in 2019. This is the cover of the headline that we had as a report produced in NRC, Norwegian Refugee Council, when the Jan England, director of NRC, visited Afghanistan. And basically, I co-wrote the report talking about how a peace deal should not compromise the gains that were, the achievements that we had in the past 20 years. So basically, this is when we were thinking about a peace deal, and the peace deal was introduced to the Afghan people. I think the peace first negotiation and coming to an agreement with the Taliban was basically among officials, and it started very early in 2010. But then the public and the majority of Afghan nationals got to know about it in early 2018, and it became more serious as the negotiations between the Taliban and the United States continued. This is the map that we came to conclude at the second organization that I worked with as a researcher, this is Afghanistan Analyst Network. You can see that by mid-July 2021, most of these provinces that are colored in orange is basically taken completely by the Taliban. And this is prior to the fall of Kabul, and I mean prior to the month of August. What happened between 2018 and 2021, which was the year that Kabul, Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, is that the negotiation, the deal that US was negotiating with the Taliban compromised the behavior and also the performance of the Afghan forces in the field. It had a very degrading and negative moral effect on the forces in the fields, as well as it began a kind of backdoor deal making between the officials in the provinces and the Taliban, because it said that the US is gonna withdraw, and then you will eventually not be able to hold on, and then the province would fail. So let's make a deal and make it possible. So when Joe Biden, President Biden, claimed that after we withdrew from Afghanistan, it was then that the forces collapsed and also the provinces collapsed. That is basically a false statement that was given to the press and also to the whole world. Actually, it began with the sort of the deal with the Taliban. The deal didn't include Afghan people. There was national plea among women advocated, opposition leaders, also people in Afghanistan. They all advocated for inclusion of their voices in the deal that the US was making with the Taliban, but it never happened. And when the deal was made, actually, there was nothing to be done after that. And then the tribal, the ethnic dynamics within Afghanistan, as well as what was happening in, the deal makings and also the lobbying that was being made by some of the Afghans in the United States. For example, Ambassador Khalilzad basically played a very important role on bringing Taliban to power because of the ethnic dynamic that it had for the Pashtun population in Afghanistan. So when we talk about the fall of Afghanistan, we mostly see the fall of Kabul. As you saw, most of the provinces were already fallen to the Taliban, but when August 15 happened and Kabul fell to the Taliban, that is when most of the world got to know about what is happening really in Afghanistan, while it was going on for over 3 years. Provinces were falling, and basically the security situation was deteriorating. The fall of Kabul basically revealed the naked reality of what was truly happening, and the leadership vacuum that happened. So the president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, escaped the country. Most people, how my people see it back in the country, especially the non-Pashtun population, see it as a handover of the power to the Pashtuns, because Taliban came from the same tribe and ethnic population as the president comes, so that the mistake that happened in 2001 doesn't happen. And if there was a peaceful transfer of power and a peace deal between the Afghan government and the Taliban, basically there would be a power sharing government between other ethnic groups too. So most people in Afghanistan see it as the president handing the power to the Taliban so it doesn't go to others. What happened was other ethnic leaders also escaped Afghanistan, and the national resistance that was forming in Panjshir province, the only province that was not captured by the Taliban by then, didn't gain momentum because there was not enough international support for it, and also other resistances in other provinces, they were just looking how much this national resistance could gain ground, but it never happened. There was the financial chaos, the evacuation disaster that we all saw live, maybe on TV. I'm sorry, I hear my voice back. I don't know if it's.
Yeah, please, I'm trying to shut all mute all the mics. Please, mute your mics, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Women and minority rights changed, as well as people in Afghanistan now are divided more than ever. Why? Because the notion of unity, the notion of nationalism in Afghanistan has changed, because mostly now people are divided along their ethnic groups, because Taliban formed the suggested government, the transitional government that is suggested by the Taliban is all formed by the Taliban members, which most of them, 98% of them are from the one ethnic group, and also they have the support of majority of the Pashtun population in the country. So a divided Afghanistan, basically a deteriorated financial and economic system, a rise, a peak in displacement and refugee crisis in Afghanistan, and the issue of hunger and famine. This is a video from 8 November 2021. This is Helmand province, a southern province in Afghanistan. And this is how Taliban basically executed people who committed theft. And some of, I think one of them committed theft, and the other two are people who were previously members of the military. I'm sorry if this image is saddening, but this is called the Dance of the Dead, which they would kill and hang these people and take them around the city to show. And this happened not only in Helmand, but in other provinces. But because of the absence of the media, most of these events are not reported. This only today, the report came from Human Rights Watch saying that only in 4 provinces, 100 former police and intelligence officers were either displaced or disappeared or killed by the Taliban. Despite the claim of the general amnesty the Taliban ensured for the people of Afghanistan, either people in media or the officials or also the military members of the previous government. What happened to the minority ethnic and religious groups is also drastic. So after the Taliban takeover, provinces like Daikundi and Bamiyan and some Shia residents in other southern provinces were forced to leave their homes. Basically, there are issues of land grabs. You can see in these media reports here that Taliban basically redistribute people's lands to their fighters, and these lands are basically belong to the Shia or ethnic minorities, basically in this case Hazaras. Till now, till the date, we thought it's only Hazaras who's are being prosecuted in this way and who's are being impacted in this way. But as you see, Shahzad Akbar tweet in here, I have mentioned she was the head of Human Rights Independence Commission in Afghanistan. Now, Uzbek minority is also being displaced and their lands are being grabbed by the Taliban. There are also even while the attacks on Shias, specifically in Hazaras, was present during the previous government, it has not stopped and also increased during the Taliban regime. Women are no difference under the Taliban. Women's rights is impacted severely. Secondary schools were banned. In some provinces, it was reopened, and just for the Taliban to show, to grab a media attention and also advocate for their legitimacy, basically, but also it went back and the schools were closed. It's important to remind that the schools for girls were not officially closed during the Taliban in the 90s either. There was always a claim of insecurity for the girls for their schools to reopen, but it never opened, and it is continuing during the Taliban took over now. Women lost their minimum measures of access to justice. Women safe houses, usually victims of domestic violence, were after the Taliban took over, were moved to prisons. There is reporting of women being killed, women media workers being killed, but these are basically not reported because the provinces are under media blockade and no one can report from there. Journalism is no difference. Basically, what we see in international media is white journalists, men and women, going to Afghanistan and being able to report freely from what is happening in Afghanistan, as you see one example here. But what is really happening is journalists can be beaten up, can be killed, and are basically threatened to close their reporting in Afghanistan by the Taliban. What we see basically in the mainstream media that is reporting in the international sphere is not what really is happening on the ground in Afghanistan. So the economic crisis, the famine in international, the famine and basically the crisis that is going on in Afghanistan now is a reason for Taliban to advocate for international legitimacy and international fund. Taliban to want to use this humanitarian crisis to say that we are the only caretaker government that can handle this, and for the international community to be able to access areas in Afghanistan for humanitarian assistance. They have to recognize us and they have to work with us. So the frozen assets of Afghanistan and international reserves are being by Taliban apologists basically are being advocated to reopen to the Taliban. However, Taliban still holds very strong ties with Al-Qaeda based on legitimate reports. There are high-rank officials of Taliban who are still members of the Taliban government that are in the United Nations sanction list, and 1 million Afghan children could die due to this crisis and disagreement between the international community and the Taliban. 90% of the population is under poverty line, and 1 million of the population is in the risk of starvation.
3 minutes.
Thank you for the reminder. Basically, this is, I really try to summarize what is happening in Afghanistan and in the ground. And with this, I want to conclude that the Taliban have been using violence as a leverage to gain the claims that they wanted to gain. They basically they go around the city and they go around to conferences and to talking about how they force United States to get out of Afghanistan and how they defeated the United States basically. And this defeat was done by the means of violence. the violence that basically and primarily was done upon Afghan people and the population of Afghanistan, and the violence continues till the day. And mostly, if even the international fund and aid would be coming back to Afghanistan, and the humanitarian assistance would come back to Afghanistan, it wouldn't be going to the people of Afghanistan, but to Taliban military, to Taliban funding of violence to a further extent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Khadija Hussaini, for this presentation. It's definitely it's heartbreaking, and we'll have more discussion on this. And because you spoke liquidly about human rights and also migration and displacement, so I think it is a good segue to my colleague, Dr. Rachel Navarre, to start her presentation. And of course, she is one of our own. She is assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at the Bridgewater State University. And her research focuses on comparative public policy, specifically issues of framing and issues of definition, immigration policy and politics, regional governance, populism, and content analysis. And I think we will benefit from her analysis. And my friend Rachel, the floor is yours, and we are ears to listen.
All right, so what my talk today, let me see if I can share my screen. My talk today is going to be about the refugee crisis, or the refugee acceptance in the United States. All right, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes,
Yes.
beautiful.
All right. So this is statistics from the UNHCR. As the previous speaker said, there is a human rights crisis and a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Kabul fell on August 15th, 2021. And this is the UNHCR's mid-year report. An estimated, you can see here, 680,000 Afghans have been newly displaced inside the country since January. So this is internally displaced people, in addition to the people that were already internally displaced. We have 2.2 million Afghan refugees that have found refuge living in neighboring countries. And even though I'm going to be talking about the United States here and their policies, the majority of Afghan refugees are either internally displaced or living in Pakistan and Iran. And 80% of all forcibly displaced people are women and children. Sorry. Now here you can see this is the main countries of origin for international displacement at mid-2021. So this is before before June. So January to June. You can see here that Afghanistan is already third on the list before the complete Taliban takeover. So what caused these scenes at the Kabul airport? You know, these scenes were the scenes that, of course, captivated the world and made the many people say, you know, we have to bring people here. Why? And it also raised a lot of questions as to why were US citizens and Afghan allies, quote unquote, left in Afghanistan. Well, first, let's talk about refugees and refugee admission in the United States. Now, a refugee, so in total, about the UNHCR says, the High Commission of Refugees says that 6 million Afghans have been driven out of their home and country by conflict. And what a refugee is set out in the 1951 UN Refugee Commission, which defines a refugee as someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or a political opinion. So for most of the 20th century, the United States has resettled more people than anywhere else in the world. This changed in 2017. Here you can see in 2017, for the first time in modern history, the United States settled far fewer refugees than the rest of the world. In fiscal year 2020, the United States settled only 11,814 refugees, which was the fewest in any year since the creation of the refugee program. And on this slide, you can see what is called the refugee ceiling, which is basically each year Congress, for the president, supposedly in consultation with Congress, says how many refugees are we going to allow in. The dark blue is the ceiling. The light blue is the number of refugees that would actually got into the United States. So you can see there is a huge Trump effect. Okay, in 2017 and 2021, there's little stars because half of that was Obama. Trump came in, dropped the ceiling. In 2021, that was Trump. Biden came in and increased the ceiling. Okay, so a lot of things had happened, and we start seeing refugee admission, the ceiling declining, and then in 2020 and 2018, the amount of refugees admitted don't even make it to that ceiling. And in 2021, this also happens. Now, this is just a quick overview of where refugees are coming from and the peak of refugees. You can see 1975 is the response to Vietnam. We see the rise in the 90s from Soviet refugees and a bump from Kosovo. And then that's really when we see the change that Asia includes refugees from Afghanistan as well. Asia would be counted here. Now, how many Afghanistan refugees were admitted during these years? So I know this is a lot of stuff going on. I wanted to put the ceiling chart and refugees admitted so you could see what the numbers were, to remind you what the numbers were for all refugees. And this is Afghanistan, and the table is Afghanistan refugees. So in fiscal year 2021, 872 Afghanistan refugees were admitted into the United States. Of course, this is the beginning of fiscal year 21. So this is, okay. In fiscal year 2020, which was October 2020 to September 21st, 604 Afghanistan refugees were admitted. And you can see how these numbers have varied over time. Now, the key thing is the refugee process is at least a 2-year process. During the Obama era, it was about 2 years. Now that time has gone on further. Basically, with the refugee process, you leave your country, you get registered with the UN High Council of Refugees. They say, yes, you are a refugee. They assign you to a country, and then the country then has to go through a process of vetting you and getting you a visa, and that can take years. And this vetting, President Trump wanted to use extreme vetting, so that lengthened the procedure as well. So these people in the refugee process have been in the refugee process for years at this point. Now, what about the special immigrant visa? These would be our allies. These would be the people that worked with US troops in special capacities. So these briefly were created in 2016 or in 2006, and originally it only allowed 50 Afghan and Iraqis interpreters who worked with US forces for at least a year. And even to this point, only 3% of US allies have come in through this program. We expanded it for Iraqis in 2008. In 2009, we changed it from 1 year to 2 years of service. It set a cap for 1,500. And the latest cap is 26,500 with 15,600 issued by April of 2021. And this is a 14-step process in order to get this. So this is part of the reason why it takes so long. And it starts with applying with the US Chief of Mission in Afghanistan. And the Chief of Mission basically has to say that, yes, you worked there, you qualify for this visa, you worked with troops. Well, the chief of mission, it's very hard to get this. And this is where one of the biggest hurdles takes place. This, of course, has been complicated by the fall of Kabul. Anyone that worked with a contractor or anything like that, a lot of places burnt their documents when they left. So proving that you worked with US troops or the US government or international organizations is extremely hard. So even if you qualify, if you didn't already have the special immigrant visa in process, it is very hard for you to just get the paperwork that you need to do. The second stalling point is with the consulate. Once you get proof, then you go to the consulate to get the visa. The consulate has been understaffed and closed down due to COVID-19. So this caused another increasing backlog for people to get their visa. So a lot of people that got on were airlifted out were in some stage of the special immigrant visa space. So here is the special immigrant visas issued to Afghanistan. Now this also includes their family members. Okay, so this is anyone who is both the primary applicant and their family members. So while this is a pretty decent, has increased a lot, there's still a lot of people that applied for this that haven't yet gotten it. And here you can see the backlogs. In 2013, legislation did say that it should only take 9 months. The current processing time is 703 days, and that's just to process your visa, not to get you to the US. There was a lawsuit about this, still really hasn't done anything. The other thing is there are by March 31st, there were fewer than 11,000 visas left, with an estimated 18,000 in the backlog. Congress did pass an act on July 22nd with 8,000 additional visas. Now, just to quickly go through the other two ways that Afghans could seek refuge in the United States are the Priority 2 visas. These are people who worked with employees of contractors, locally employed staff, interpreters, translators for the government, international security force, or Resolute Support, or who were employed in Afghanistan by a US-based media organization or non-governmental organization. Okay. Then you also have what most of the Afghans who fled during the summer would receive. So you have refugee, SIV, Priority 2, and then parole authority. Now, parole authority is basically the president's ability as the executive to allow people to come in, to parole them and give them a temporary protected status that lasts for 2 years. This is, so you can see this is the website, and I can also give Jabbar the PowerPoint if people want to go through these links and see. But basically, they are eligible to apply for benefits as well until the end of their parole term. And these are what most people are going to be entering the United States as. This is not the first time we've used it. Here are some past uses from the Immigration Forum and talking about the parolee population. They have not published any data on how many parolees have been admitted to the US. I tried to find it and couldn't. But it appears that they are planning to get at least 50,000. It was expected by the summer. It's not clear. They had been evacuating through the airport. Now, this is not evacuees. This is the parolees. And this is also parolees that didn't just leave like Vietnam at the time, but after the fall of Saigon and everything. In case you're interested, here are the federally funded benefits refugees, SIV, and parolees get. As you can see, humanitarian parolees do not qualify for as many benefits, although the US government, the Biden administration, is allowing them to apply for some.
2 minutes.
Okay. So I just threw a lot of numbers at you. So you may be wondering, though, why have these numbers been so small? Why do we see refugee dropping, even though we knew the case in the situation in Afghanistan was worsening? Why didn't we have an increase in SIV visas knowing the situation in Afghanistan was worsening? Well, one thing, there's always been a fight over the SIV visas. They've been a deal. You help us out, and if it becomes unsafe for you to remain in your country, we'll help you out. But there's been a lot of pushback with the idea, well, you should stay in your country and fight for it. You were working with US military forces, you're better qualified to stay there and fight for your own country. So you shouldn't be helping out the US so you can get a visa. So there's been pushback in Congress for making it easier for people to get the SIV visa. The other thing is people tend not to like refugees. It's not popular to bring in refugees. So if the Biden administration or even the Trump administration had tried to increase the number, I don't think the Trump administration was interested in this. There would have been significant public pushback. So this is a history of whether or not the American public wanted to accept refugees or not from different areas. And even Pew's recent survey, this was conducted September 13th, 2021, we see 56% of people admitting refugees from Afghanistan to the United States, but there's still many that oppose, and the strong oppose, it is partisan. More Republicans oppose than Democrats do. Okay, so that gives you, hopefully that explains why we saw that rush, why people hadn't been evacuated or given refugee status before that time frame. And thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really, this is a very interesting presentation. And before I give the floor to our guest from Iraq, Dr. Diyari Salih, because he will shed some light on how Iraqis look at the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. We heard that the Iraqis are probably happy to the government because what happened, and as our first speaker actually reminded us that probably the United States is redefining the way and the shape and the relation with the Middle East and other regions, whatever the pressure come from because of China or otherwise. Because of the importance of what the Iraqis feel about this withdrawal, which is by all, a lot of literature says was really hectic and it was chaos and it wasn't as pleasant. Dr. Salih, you will speak just a moment. I would like to recognize Dr. Fawaz. Naveed Fawaz, he is the interim director of MENA Studies Program at Bridgewater State University. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And also, I would like to remind ourselves that my friend, Dr. Laura McAlinden, she is the moderator, and the first question will come from her when we conclude the last session, and in terms of speaking engagement. Dr. Salih, the floor is yours, and if you have PowerPoint, you can share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this important chance to participate in this session. This is the first time for me as an Iraqi researcher to be asked to give a speech on such a vital topic concerning the geopolitical consequences of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. I hope that I will be able to transfer my thoughts correctly and to talk honorably about how Iraqis look at this step taken by the United States of America. To be honest, nowadays there is very important an approach that I would like to make between the Afghani issues and the Iraqi issues. As Ms. Khadija talked about the geopolitical landscape in Afghanistan, it is completely the same thing here in Iraq. We have the same setbacks, we have the the same catastrophes, but the international community doesn't know anything about in reality. This is one of the similar challenges we have nowadays in Afghanistan and Iraq, though the great distance from geographical point of view between Afghanistan and Iraq for sure. Therefore, the most important question that many Iraqis nowadays are asking is, what is the lesson we have learned from the Afghani experience? The direct answer is that many academics are clearly talking about is that the United States of America will leave us to fate our bad fate, which will be under the control of the radical Islamists who will control on power in the upcoming months or years after the proposed American withdrawal from Iraq. As the Afghani government has had an agreement with the United States of America to prepare for this step concerning the withdrawal. We also have in Iraq the same agreement confirming that the United States of America must withdraw from Iraq in the end of the next month, in the end of December. Otherwise, there will be a great problem concerning the reaction of the popular mobilization forces against the United States of America. And the scene that many Iraqis are afraid of is the chaos. The second point is the American discourse in Afghanistan. It is the same thing in Iraq. During 20 years of American presence in Afghanistan, there was a real precise affirming that the United States of America will help the Afghani government to spread democracy, public opinion, freedom, and so on, but in the end it failed and unexpectedly left Afghanistan. The same thing is happening nowadays here in Iraq. We have a lot of restrictions against the freedom, and all those things happened under the eye of the United States of America, under the eye of the international community. Unfortunately, we had not expected that the situation in Afghanistan and Iraq would develop in this bad way. And some other important thing concerning the corruption, which is widely spreading in both countries, and the governmental institutions are not entrusted by society, by public opinion. And one of the most important thing happens in both cases, that corrupt politicians in Iraq and Afghanistan are fighting against corruption in the governmental institutions. This is one of the funny things happened in our political life. So there is no trust in such governments. Therefore, we fear that all the Afghani government didn't have the ability to face the scenario of capturing Kabul by Taliban. The same thing would happen in Baghdad when the government would not be able to face the radical factions that clearly declaring that they would like to control on power. The other thing concerning the role that played by the United States of America to support known patriotic forces, patriotic parties to reach to the power in Afghanistan and in Iraq. After 2 years, the United States of America declared that it would give its enemies the opportunity to control on power. This sends a clear message not just to the Afghanis, but also to the Iraqis, to the Arabian Gulf states as well, that the friends of the United States of America are weak, while its enemies have the ability or have the chance to capture and power, while the United States of America doesn't do anything to prevent this scenario. This is a very bad future we are afraid of. And I'd like also to talk about some other things concerning how Iraqis looks at the geopolitical tactics by the United States of America. They say that in Afghanistan, they left this country to Taliban so that it could leave the headache of Afghanistan to Iran and to China. It might do the same thing in Iraq, to leave this country, to leave this experience, which is highly bad for its impact on the American interests. It might leave it to Iran, to the Saudi Arabia, to Turkey, and so on. So in both cases, it means that the United States of America will leave a chaotic case in this huge region. Another important thing concerning the radicalism in Afghanistan and in Iraq. As Khadija mentioned, Taliban had a very strong ties with Al-Qaeda, and it might return back to such relations to be extended for a long arena from Afghanistan till Iraq by having another relationship with Islamic State, with Daesh. We all know that Islamic State has not been defeated completely, especially here in Iraq. From time to time, we hear about some terrorist attacks in some Iraqi cities. This is a confirmation that a new geopolitics of Islamic radicalism can rise after this period. And this will for sure lead to a new geopolitics of sectarian wars in this huge area between Shia and Sunni. Therefore, this is also one of the things we have afraid of. Another important thing concerning the collapse of the state in both Afghanistan and Iraq. During 20 years of the American presence in this area to support what is called the new nation state in Afghanistan and Iraq has been taken a big blow. Therefore, in Afghanistan, as we see in media, there's a devastated country. There's a possibility to divide this country into many separate areas. And there's a possibility to have a local conflict between different groups, especially to be taken into account that also Afghanistan and Iraq has a mixed population structure, many groups from sectarian and ethnic perspective. This is the same thing might happen here in Iraq. All Iraqi academics believe that the experience of the state supported by the United States of America here in Iraq will be ended, but there is no specific time to talk about. this is also one of the shared things between Afghanistan and Iraq. Also, we saw that, okay, thank you. Also, we saw that Taliban, when came to power recently, there was no resistance against Taliban, neither by society nor by military forces. This is the same thing that happened in Mosul city when Islamic State in 2014 came to control on that important city in Iraq. We fear that the same thing might happen again, but in another way. I know that the situation is much more complicated in Iraq. However, in general, that Iraqi academics, Iraqi observers say that we can learn from the Afghani experience that we should prepare ourselves to the gloomy future that we are awaiting. I know that the time is restricted and I have much more details to talk about. So I would like to give the turn to the next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Diyari Salih. Thank you for this very important contribution. And I will, of course, ask my friend, Professor Brian Frederick, to present. He is the head of the political science department, or if you will, the chair. And he is, I think I want to remind everybody that he's the author of the last book, Congressional Representation and Constituents, the case for increasing the House of Representatives. And definitely the public's perspective book on 2018, his very active researcher, and I think you will be very amazed by what his perspective is about this. And now I would like to bring him to the floor. My friend, Brian.
Yes, thanks for having me on the panel. I know we're sort of getting to the end here, so I'm just going to truncate my remarks. And I think as an American political scientist, I can help add some context to this debate by kind of giving some insight on public opinion and how the American people felt about this decision by President Biden to withdraw from Afghanistan. And then after those brief remarks, I'll turn it back over so we can get some questions from the audience. So I think it's important to understand that there are political consequences from this decision, even though I don't think it was one necessarily that President Biden was eagerly anticipating handling when he came into office. There was the agreement that was reached with the prior administration, but President Trump obviously didn't win re-election, so it was up to President Biden to carry out that agreement. He extended the timetable ultimately from May until the summer, but he did follow through with the policy. And by and large, it was a policy that the American public favored. I'm just going off of one poll here from Quinnipiac University from the middle of September. And it asked the American public, do you support President Biden's plan to withdraw troops from Afghanistan? And 54% of Americans approved, 41% disapproved. It's interesting, though, that when you ask Americans and take President Biden's name out of the mix, he's a very partisan figure, and just ask, do you think ending the war in Afghanistan was the right thing for the United States to do or the wrong thing? 69% of the public said that it was the right thing compared to 24% who thought it was the wrong thing. So clearly there was war weariness in the United States, and the continued occupation of Afghanistan was something that was very unpopular. I think President Trump recognized this in his 2016 campaign and sort of broke with Republican orthodoxy to call for an exit from Afghanistan. He wasn't able to complete the task for a variety of different reasons, but ultimately this idea of continually being involved in Afghanistan did not have the support of the American people. However, when you look at the question of do you approve or disapprove of the way President Biden handled withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, we see that 31% of the public approved, 65% disapproved. And I think we can also see that if we look at President Biden's approval rating prior to withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, he consistently had an approval rating over 50%. And was getting good marks from the public. Now we can argue that maybe some other factors came into play that are driving down his ratings: the continued problems with COVID, rising inflation, other issues. But I think we can't underestimate the fact that there was something that happened during that period in August that created a drag on his approval rating. And I think part of it had to do with the fact for the first time during his administration, and indeed probably going back to the campaign, President Biden started to receive negative coverage from the mainstream media. Up until that point, he largely received praise and favorable coverage from the mainstream media outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, major networks, MSNBC, CNN, NPR. Only really the conservative media, Fox and conservative talk radio and other conservative websites were critics of Biden. But this decision was very unpopular in the American media, particularly among reporters that cover the Pentagon. We saw figures like Andrea Mitchell of NBC News, who's very connected to the military and political establishment, be very critical openly of President Biden's decision. So one might wonder why, if this decision was popular and yet Biden received so much pushback, why was he willing to do it? Why was he willing to carry out this policy that he himself didn't initiate originally? Well, I think we've heard it from some of the other speakers, but he isn't doing this because he's a non-interventionist. His career in the Senate and vice president indicates that he wants America to play an active role in the world, have a military presence that continues to project American force throughout the world. We saw this yesterday. The Pentagon released its report on the U.S. global footprint, actually calling for the U.S. to increase some of its troop presence in the Asia Pacific region, continuation of a strategy of escalating confrontation with China. So President Biden didn't do this because he inherently believed that the Afghanistan conflict was wrong, or that it was a bad idea necessarily to have a military presence in aspects of the world. But I think he realized that if the U.S. was going to pivot its forces, redirect its forces either in the Middle East or in other parts of the world, in Asia, that the continued presence in Afghanistan was so unpopular among the American people that it would undermine support for this particular goal. And so he was willing to take the short-term hit to his approval rating, although so far it hasn't been a short-term hit. It's sustained in order to further larger foreign policy goals, which he no longer felt Afghanistan met. And so we have historical precedent for maybe Biden making a gamble in this way that Gerald Ford, the withdrawal from Vietnam, similarly heavily criticized for what happened and the events surrounding it. But by the time we got to this 1976 campaign, Ford did end up losing, but it was a much closer race than expected with Carter, and memories of the Vietnam exit weren't necessarily on the table during that campaign. It's likely that the issue of Afghanistan will not be a major issue in the 2024 campaign should Biden decide to seek re-election. But there will be a continued focus on what the U.S. is going to do in terms of China's emergence. We're transforming from a unipolar world to a new world where there is a powerful enough force in the world to counteract the United States. Soon, China will pass the United States in overall global GDP. It's continuing its influence throughout the world through its Belt and Road Initiative, and it's going to continue to dominate American politics in terms of the major foreign policy issue. And so obviously, there are going to continue to be consequences with Afghanistan, what happens in their country. But for the United States, Biden was willing to take a short-term political hit in order to advance larger foreign policy goals, which I think is reflected in the stance that he took. So I'll end my comments there. I'm happy to answer any questions during the question and answer period. If there are other questions about American public opinion or thoughts on Afghanistan, I'm happy to weigh in if it can be helpful. So I'll turn it back over to the moderators.
Thank you, Brian. Laura?
Hello, everyone. I want to thank all of the speakers. So we have had a really comprehensive, robust explanation of some of the history and the current state of affairs in Afghanistan. I deeply appreciate all of the detail that you have all provided for our audience. I am curious about what the role of the US is currently in the country and what their role might be going forward. I understand that the troops have withdrawn, but there's still some US presence in Afghanistan, either through the UN Refugee Organization or some other political arm. I'm wondering if anyone can speak to that.
I could speak shortly about what Taliban wants US basically to the measure of presence that Taliban would want the American government have in Afghanistan was 2 days ago. The foreign minister of Taliban, Abbas Stanigzai, talked in an event calling on US to reopen their embassy in Afghanistan, to have diplomatic relations with the Taliban government. And based on Zalmay Khalilzad's recent interview, I think it was in a talk at a university, I don't remember which university here in the US, he talked about the secret clauses that never got their way into the public, the secret clauses that the Afghan government got to know about at the very end of the collapse, at their duration of the government in Kabul and before the collapse of Kabul. These clauses are the last two clauses in the US Taliban agreement that was signed in Doha, which basically I think the details of the clauses are not clear yet, but I think it talks about how the US would work with the Taliban to counter ISIS in Afghanistan, which now the leader of the Daesh, ISIS, basically is in Afghanistan. I think the Ministry of Defense a week ago revealed that the leader of the ISIS was working as a special guard for the vice president of Afghanistan. And the ISIS is gaining ground basically, and now having more presence in eastern and also southern provinces of Afghanistan. So that would be, I think, a reason why the US would want to continue its collaboration with the Taliban. Thank you.
Any one of our speakers? to add to this? If not, I would ask the five speakers. So there were two scenarios when United States decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. One scenario was, well, 20 years. That's enough, as Brian mentioned. It's most likely not popular with the public opinion and with the Americans. Therefore, we should withdraw. The second reading for that is, well, if we're going to stay there, then we're going to claim this is another long war, and we're going to actually has a lot of consequences on us in the United States. Well, some say there was another outlet for that. We know Doha agreement was signed by President Trump, and there was different provisions there. And so the reading for this scenario, or the third option, is to probably enrich that agreement. Especially, you have a very major player there, Qatar, and the Qatari government was really standing ready. As you know now, it represents the American interest in Kabul and in Afghanistan. So why is this three approaches? He as a president, seemed to elect the first one, no matter what? Any one of our speakers?
Well, I would just say the facts on the ground. There was no way that once the U.S. announced that the military presence was going to exit, that the Afghan government couldn't stand up and fight. They lost. The Taliban was going to take over, and this was predicted in the Afghanistan papers. If you go and read the Afghanistan papers published by the Washington Post, you'll see anonymous U.S. officials and officials on the record saying that they didn't see a way that the U.S. could eventually win this conflict, that a new government that was not the Taliban was going to come into place without a permanent occupation for a number of years. And so I think Biden looked at it and said, we're going to have to do it at some point, and this is going to be the end result no matter what. We can talk about trying to come up with other scenarios, but in the end, this was a fait accompli, and so I think that's why the decision was made.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, Rachel, and then Dr. Anani. Rachel, yes.
I mean, I would say too, part of it is you have to look at, what happened. Like Brian said, it was a fait accompli. Trump wanted the win. Trump wanted to have be able to come out and say that he ended the war in Afghanistan. And he put this into practice. It withdrew a lot of troops. And by the time Biden was doing the withdrawal, there weren't really enough troops to do any major military excursions or things in the country. They would have had to bring more troops in, which, as Brian pointed out too, was incredibly domestically unpopular. So while Americans weren't always happy with the way it did, Americans weren't happy with the way it was. And I don't know how much what was best for Afghanistan was actually, calculated in these decisions.
Good question. Dr. Anani? And mute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think, looking at Afghanistan, it's not different from any other historical events which really governed the US behavior after they decided to leave countries or to leave areas of conflict. For instance, there is the Japanese scenario, where the Americans actually dictated a modus operandi and also a model for democratization of Japan. This was a win-win situation. This was a windful scenario, which really worked out very well for Japan. Then there is the Korean scenario, where we ended up dividing the country being divided between North and South. And then you ended up with a Korea that was South Korea, that's pro-West, pro-American. And then you have the continuous challenge and nagging problem that is represented by North Korea. The third scenario is the Vietnamese, is that you leave Vietnam, and there are pictures of what happened in Afghanistan that are reminiscent of what happened in Miss Saigon as a play, if you remember, in New York. These scenarios, but then the Americans, came back and decided to create relations with that. Now, when they came to Afghanistan, actually they were calculating costs. For instance, they said the war has cost about $2 trillion. Now, $2 trillion spent on whom? And who actually got the money? I mean, you look at the expense from a budgetary point of view, of course it cost $2 trillion. But where did that money end? Not to the Afghanistan, it's for sure, because if you had spent that much money in Afghanistan, Afghanistan would be a very good country. I was looking at data now, and I found out that the average per capita income in Afghanistan is only $570. So in a way, Afghanistan did not win that.
Thank you for this point. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Len. Thank you, Dr. Alanani. Len?
Yes, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I guess, first of all, I want to say this is so informative and so humbling to hear all about this, just incredible. I do want to ask Brian, though, I'm wondering, I know he mentioned it, he didn't think it would have an effect on the 2024 election, but I'm wondering if he thought the withdrawal from Afghanistan would have an effect on the 2022, or will it be kind of passé by then? I'm just curious what he thinks about that.
Thank you. Let me bring Khadija to have an answer, and then Brian will answer later. Okay, Khadija.
Yes, I wanted to say that maybe U.S. withdrawal was inevitable, and at some point U.S. had to withdraw from Afghanistan. But I think the way the withdrawal turned out and the negotiation with the Taliban was basically done. It was like, this is a done game, and we don't care about the people out there, and we don't care how it plays out, and we just want to get out of the country. And that basically not only legitimized the violence that happened in the past 20 years of the Taliban, it basically gave Taliban the power to rule Afghanistan the way that they are ruling now. They could withdraw, US could withdraw responsibly and had the leverage to do so.
Thank you. Chen, if you have a question or comment, and then we'll bring Brian.
I want to ask.
Get 6 minutes out of you in addition to that. Go ahead.
I want.
Chen.
Okay.
Doctor.
Yeah, now US withdrew from.
We'll come. We're not gonna miss you. Chen, go ahead, please.
Okay. Now US withdrew from the Afghanistan, and a Chinese government has recognized the Taliban, and now Taliban asked them probably for money, for aid. And what do the Afghanistans think? Is it good to have the Chinese come in and help and have relations? So I just see what kind of ideas that you have. Yeah,
that's a good question. Dr. Salih, you want to say something before I have a lot of hands there. Briefly, you want to say something? And
Okay,
Brian, stand by, Brian, please.
Thank you. I'd like to add something concerning the three scenarios you have mentioned. I think there is something we have missed in this important point. It is the desire of Afghani people. We do not talk about it. What Afghani people want from this situation. Nowadays, there is widely talking about this point. Afghanistan has shifted from the occupation of the United States of America to the occupation of Taliban. For sure, this doesn't meet the Afghani ambitions. Therefore, here I'd like to say that we have talked a lot about the regional and international players affecting the Afghani future. But how do players look at the Afghani people? Do they look at them as pawn on the chessboard? Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so just briefly to Len's question, the Afghanistan issue won't directly be an issue in the withdrawal won't be an issue in the congressional elections. There aren't going to be too many congressional candidates that are campaigning on the platform. Let's reinvade Afghanistan. Let's continue military intervention. It's not very popular, but the fact that it did receive such negative coverage in the media, the way that it was handled, whether you agree with it or disagreed with it, had a depressing effect on Biden's approval rating that he has not been able to recover from yet. So if it's about approval rating, which in the aggregate polls is about 42% right now, is at that level in the 2022 midterm elections, the Democrats are going to suffer a massive defeat. They will most certainly lose the House. They'll probably lose close to around 40 to 50 seats, and they'll probably lose the Senate and several governorships. And so Biden will be in a very precarious position coming forward in the 2024 elections. He won't be able to get anything done for the final 2 years of his presidency.
Thank you.
Let's go back to Khadija, and then we have a hand for Dr. Hanan Shibini from Cairo University. Khadija, briefly, please.
Yes, I wanted to answer a question raised by Mr. Chan.
Yeah.
I believe Afghans mostly how they see China and China's intervention in Afghanistan is based on how Muslims and Muslim minorities are being treated in China itself, as well as China does not, in comparison to the United States, China does not really care what the political, the human rights and the women's rights situation in the country would be, the country that they have intervened in. But Afghans mostly now, they feel being held hostage by the Taliban. And if that kind of, the government of the tyranny of the Taliban, the dictatorship of the Taliban continues with the support of China, I wouldn't think even that support would be very popular among Afghan people. Thank you.
Okay, the last question comes from Hanan. Hanan, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Jabbar. Thank you for this information. About Ms. Khadija showed us picture with the correspondent reporter from Afghanistan, wears the veil, scarf on here. I think Taliban hit the open media and disdain the right of women to work as a journalist, of course. But its current pragmatic version, it will show a degree flexibility with the media field according to its ruling, trying to balance international pressure, and when it's finished with a plan empowerment and stability in governance, it will never slow down in imposing its tough vision on the sector. I want to ask Ms. Khadija, what about media in Afghanistan for women now? After this picture, which I see it, and another scene I saw it before, interview with Maulawi Abdel Haq, is a prominent leader in the movement, conducted as the media with interview with a broadcaster working for the Tulu news station. In this meeting, this leader showed acceptance of the idea of female media worker and was not keen to ignore his presence of just look at the camera.
Yeah. Yes, with your permission, I will get the answer offline from from Khadija and send it to you by email. Send it to Laura because we want to be mindful of your time. Yeah, I know it's already past 10 minutes. Laura, please.
Right. So I just want to say thank you to all of the guests and panel for all of the very interesting questions. For closing remarks, I would like to turn it to Dr. Wen-Kai To, Professor and Assistant Provost for Global Engagement. Dr. To.
Thank you, Dr. McAlinden. Thank you, Dr. Al-Obaidi. And thank you all the guests today who provide such diverse and multifaceted perspectives on the Afghanistan situation and the US withdrawal. I think that it points out that there are long-term historical factors that affected US roles in the region that cannot be resolved just in a short time. You know, the history of colonialism, the history of wars, and the history of political conflict in the region were long-standing crises that affected peoples in the region. There were times that the United States were able to develop certain kinds of reforms and that helped the people and reform part of the country and the society. And there were at times that the United States inflicted more harms to the people of the region. And I think we have to take a much more global view and know that no country is perfect, and there were certain countries that did more harm than the others in our interventions. And we definitely want to learn the historical lessons and try to help the countries both by diverse measures. So today we talk about different ways in which the United States could play a more positive role or should try to remain engaged in the region, whether it's by accepting more refugees or engaging with the diaspora communities to support the reforms and help the people in the region, or try to negotiate with other countries in the area, and not to really just to think about the world in bipolar terms, but in a much more multipolar perspectives, and taking into the perspectives of the Middle East, Central Asia, and also South Asia. I know that I have mixed feelings about the US approach to the Indo-Pacific, or using India as a kind of counterweight against Afghanistan and Pakistan. But those things are, going to be defined in the years to come with the role of India and China and Pakistan. But we learn a lot more about Iraq and also Jordan as important role in maintaining peace in the region as well. So again, I think Afghanistan is the crossroads of the world, and for many years it's also the victims of colonialism. So we have to understand that the mixed legacies of Afghanistan happened for hundreds of years. So continuously, we will have to make sure that it becomes the crossroads of the world, but also it's not the victim of colonialism in the future. So again, I want to thank Minister, Alani, thank, Doctor from Iraq and Ms. Hussaini, and my colleagues, Dr. Frederick and Dr. Navarre, for all your insightful ideas about the conflict and the crisis.
Thank you, Dr. To. Yes, definitely, we are very grateful to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Alanani, Dr. Frederick, Dr. Salih, Dr. Navarre, and of course, really, Hussaini, I'm so happy that you accepted our invitation because of I know the situation in your own country. What I would like to do is, again, to bring Laura to say the last probably paragraph to thank you. And we also would like to thank again our sponsorship and especially the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., the International Language. That's very important to us. and we will bring you on separate events probably, and we will have more discussion. And I want to make sure that I will relay our president message that is to all our international audience, as well as to our audience in the United States. Bridgewater State Campus is your campus. I consider it your home, and we will, if you have any ideas that you would like to engage us, and your country will be happy to accommodate that. Let's work together as a team. As I said, I learned from long years that if you rely on your networks an honest way and transparent way, you will gain a lot, and we can accomplish a lot. Laura?
Just to echo your remark, Bridgewater is a home for the staff faculty who are here, but also a home to all of the guests from around the world who have been here and who would like to come. We look forward to hosting you. Thank you again to all of the speakers and to the audience guests for their contributions. It's been excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very